Today we're looking at Krishna's Azealia. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Krishna's Azealia is a part of their specialty series line of inks, and it's a nice magenta color. Before we get to the writing samples, I'd like to take a look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography. Now the first one's done the way it's supposed to be done. We see that we get this nice magenta running up. It's a pink into magenta, a nice dark magenta, and then this purplish area above that. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into the water, and something interesting happens. We see a nice dark magenta line, we see some of the pink, we see up into the magenta, and then we see that purplish area again. It's very nice, but that thicker line on the bottom where it seems to want to stay makes me wonder that maybe it'll hang around. Now, resistance tests are done to see how this can be expected to hold up on the page, and more importantly for me, how hard this might be to clean out of my pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before I test it. The highlighter, it definitely reactivated. It started to feather out. It was not the prettiest thing in the world. It won't destroy your writing, but I would not use this as a note taker if I have to highlight. The water certainly reactivated it, pulled a lot of it off the page, left a very light pink to magenta color behind. You will lose what you write if you spill water on this. The same thing happens for the pen flush, but when it comes to cleaning the pen, I don't think you would need flush for this ink. But if you spilled pen flush on your notebook, then a lot of it's coming up and you're just going to be left with a pink kind of magenta color. Bleach, on the other hand, if you decide to use bleach to get this out of a pen or off of a page, it'll do it. Don't run to bleach for your pens, people. But bleach definitely removes all of it from the page. Now, this is a bell curve showing normal distribution. For the 365 inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the range of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Krishna Azealia has a viscosity of 1.82. That means this is a wet ink. I'm just going to look at these now as being wet, normal, and dry. Now, this bell curve is for the average dry time. For the 365 inks that I've tested, I have found the average dry time to be 17 seconds, and that the range of normal goes from 13 to 21 seconds. We're going to look at things as just simply faster drying, normal dry time, and slower drying. Krishna's Azealia has an average dry time of 13 seconds, which puts it right in the normal range. So it's not any kind of a problem, just a little bit faster, and it might be a fast drying ink. How do I find my average dry time? I use my writing samples. I use the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, and I average those times. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I got this ink in bottle form, and that's because when I got it, the easiest way to do it was to do really a bulk order from India. Some of the inks have been great to me, like this one. Others have not been as friendly, but this one's very nice. Only thing I have with these tiny little bottles is the filling of them. It is really difficult to fill after the first couple of times from this bottle. It's just that it's so small. It's a 15 ml bottle. It's not so horrible. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium. And I use a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. With a 1.1, we have no feather, no spread. No halo, no sheen. No color variation. No shading at all. When we go to the extra fine, we do see the color get just a little bit darker. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Now on the medium, same tone as we got with the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 13 seconds. But this is what a magenta ink should be. This color is perfect. As a magenta color, this is absolutely perfect in every way. Shading would be nice, but I like this ink. The color is truly fantastic. When we look at the scrubby, we see that there's no shading to be expected, and I could recover this if I smeared it while I was writing. On the Tomoe River, no bleeding, ghosting. Ghosting is a result of it being Tomoe River. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. With the extra fine, almost the same color, almost the same tone, just a hint darker tone than we got with the 1.1. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 14 seconds to dry. And with the medium, we get just a hint darker in tone again. So we do get just hints, the tiniest hint darker for shading based on the pen. When I use this with a Singularity, with a very dry, fine nib, it gets to be even darker, even lighter, and the color becomes that much more spectacular. But no real shading here in this writing. 18 seconds to dry. Looking at the scrubby, I do not expect to be able to see shade in this ink from the scrubby. And the smear, I can almost never recover smears when it comes to Tomoe River. Looking at Rhodia paper. That doesn't line up. That's me being sloppy again. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Nice color, though. On the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 10 seconds to dry. But this is the difference of what happens when I use the Singularity, taking notes. It gets even lighter. So we get a ton of shading difference that occurs based on the pen, based on the flow of that nib. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not that it's not a shading ink, it just doesn't shade in the writing itself. 10 seconds to dry with the extra fine. On a medium, it gets a little bit darker, little wetter nib. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 14 seconds to dry, and the no shade shows up in both scrubbies. No shading. But you could recover if you smeared this while you were writing. Now this is hazel paper. When I ordered these inks, because I was having to wait, the company had these notebooks. And these notebooks are very nice, just as a side. Hazel's the company. This is what it came from. I ordered 2 of the pocket-sized ones. They only had a graph paper. It says Hazel on the bottom. Generally, they perform pretty well. I'm not a fan of the outside feeling of it, but that doesn't bother me from enjoying the notebook. So if you go to order from them, pick up some of their notebooks. They're pretty good. They perform real well with their inks. Looking at the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Nice tone. When we're looking at the extra fine, we have minor moments of shading. Minor moments, not very much, but minor. If I look at from a left to right, it does go from a little lighter to a little darker. Not on the quick or the brown or the fox. A little on the over. Almost non-existent as shading, but it is there. And that can be a wet moment, dry moment of your pen. 6 seconds to dry. With the medium, it definitely gets darker. But we get no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 7 seconds to dry. Almost the same. When we look at the 2 scrubbies, although they can't be lined up, you do get to see that there's minor shading that occurs with the extra fine, which we did get to see a little bit of in the writing. The medium, nothing. And on a smear, I don't think you get to recover this. Next up is Strathmore Calligraphy paper. Being a laid paper, we have certain things we can expect. One, we're not going to be writing on both sides, so any kind of show-through you might have, it shows more on camera than it does in person, but it does show. No bleeding. We don't expect to get bleeding with this. It's a nice paper. Looking at the 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, but a nice color. Any of the what looks like it would be the beginning of feathering is really a result of the paper, of the texture of the paper. It's not the ink that's doing it, it's the texture of the paper. So I'm not really considering that a bleed, or sorry, a feather, even though it looks the same. I'm not considering that feathering because that's the paper, not the ink, that's doing it. That's the paper's texture where it's laid to dry. And you can feel it when you feel these papers. Looking at the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Some shading in some spots. Very minor. 7 seconds to dry. Same tone that we had with the 1.1. But when we go to the medium gives us a much darker tone. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. No shade in the writing. 10 seconds to dry. When we're looking at the scrubbies, we're not really expecting to get shading in the writing. The smear, I don't know that you would get to recover this, but I think if you want an ink that's going to look different for what pen you're using, this is a great ink. It gives you different tones based on the wet and on the flow and how broad or how fine your nib is. So this is great for that. No shading in the writing. That's what I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Krishna Azealia, I would prefer to find an ink that really complements that magenta on the page. And I started thinking about a black ink for this. And what did I go to? Noodler's Dark Matter. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I'm going to ask if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. Then I put the ink into a different pen and write with it for a day. Then I put it into a Nemosine Singularity with a fine nib to take my notes for this video. So what do I think of Krishna Azealia ink? It has no shading, but it is what a magenta is as a color. It's a beautiful magenta. You can get different tones depending on your nib. I like magentas over reds as a majority of the time, although I still do use reds. But now the big question, would I buy a bottle of this ink? Well, I have a bottle of this ink. I wouldn't buy a second bottle, but that's more cost prohibitive than anything. To order them from overseas, you'd have to order a bunch to make it worthwhile, and to order them in the US is quite expensive. So no, I would not buy another bottle of this ink. Thanks for watching.